Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, what I have here today is the Tier 7 Premium American Light Cruiser, the USS Atlanta. Now, this game is quite interesting, also is very short, but basically, I was playing World of Warship 1 o'clock in the morning, and the matchmaker decides to put a lot of cruisers in one game, only a few destroyers and definitely no battleships or aircraft carrier, which means that with the Atlanta, if you don't know anything about the Atlanta, in short, the Atlanta is basically 3 gearings smushed together into a light cruiser hull. So the Atlanta has a lot of firepower. She has one of the heaviest broadside as in terms of 127mm guns in numbers, but she definitely does not have the biggest caliber gun, which is probably why the Atlanta is very fun to play, but yet she isn't really effective. And the reason why I say she isn't effective is because she requires a lot of assistance, for example, islands, terrain, or smoke in order to utilize her firepower, because one of the lacking factor of the Atlanta is the horrible shell velocity. Now, the shell velocity or the arc on the Atlanta is like any other American light cruiser, like the Cleveland, or small caliber guns like the Gearing, Fletcher, Farragut. You know what I'm talking about. American ships with 127mm guns. They're very punchy, but they lack a lot of the shell velocity to reach their target in time. So it's pretty easy to dodge these shells if you're beyond 10 kilometers. So Atlanta has to close the distance unless you learn how to aim with the Atlanta. At the same time, get lucky enough to deal with enemies who sail in a straight line against the Atlanta. Now, when the Atlanta is facing cruisers against cruiser in the close knife battle, I can tell you something about the Atlanta. The Atlanta is opening a big can of firepower because she is very fun when it comes to picking on battleships if you're in the smoke, behind the terrain when the enemy cannot take you out. In this case, I'm doing the most idiotic decision, and that's to push into the C flag because why not? I mean, this is a cruiser-only game with a few destroyers, and the Atlanta just excels in close-range combat. So I have my 127mm guns loaded with IFHE as my skill, which is pretty important when it comes to playing cruisers with caliber guns are below 155. Now, some people don't want to take the IFHE skills, they prefer the Demolition Expert, but in this case with Atlanta makes it up with really her number of shield that she could put down range. So the IFHE that debuffs the HE isn't really a big problem because I still managed to do a lot of fire with the Atlanta. So I'm going against this Tier 6 German cruiser, the Graz Bay. The British refer her as the pocket battleship because she has the largest caliber gun for a cruiser. She was actually built during a time where she was limited in terms of displacement and the way she was designed, but she was also an impressive ship. Now, when I was talking about how there isn't any battleships in this game, the closest thing you can get is really the Graz Bay. The Graz Bay has tremendous amount of armor for a Tier 6 cruiser, and you will notice once I load AP. Now, like I said, Atlanta, she is also equipped with torpedoes. These torpedoes are not so great at all compared to something like the Flint, but they are very useful. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? So I'm going to start switching to AP. Now, the problem with the AP on the Atlanta, in this case going against the Graz Bay, is that I can actually penetrate the citadel of the Graz Bay. The reason it's not penetrating is probably because I'm not aiming at the right spot, but at the same time, you notice that my shells are very slow, that the angle of where these shells are coming is not perfectly perpendicular. But this last shot right here will be perpendicular, right under the turret. So my guess is that the Graz Bay, judging from the armor, most of our armor is at the mid section of the ship, while the under the turrets isn't that well armored. Now I'm going against this Emerald. Now, Emerald isn't really smart, okay? I think Emerald belongs in a jewelry store rather than in the warship, but in this case, this Emerald is going to understand that getting a lot of citadels with the Atlanta is satisfying, but also receiving on the other end isn't quite fun. So the Emerald basically show broadside. So something like the Royal Navy cruisers, especially the Emerald, is pretty easy to citadel. But the only way you can get the Citadel to work with the Atlanta is that you got to be close enough because of the shell arc. In order to get that Citadel, the shells have to penetrate perfectly perpendicular. The preferred distance is roughly, I would say, 3 kilometers to 4 kilometers, depending on the ship that you're dealing with. There are ships like the Emerald that you can just Citadel at a far distance, like even at 7 kilometers, but you're better off dishing out consistent damage with HE rather than switching to AP and taking those chances. But when you're guaranteed to Citadel something, switch to AP because Atlanta's, her guns reload pretty fast, very fast. This is what makes the Atlanta very fun to play. And like I said, she isn't effective compared to heavy cruisers like the Pensacola or the York because beyond 10 kilometers, you're just going to lose against those cruisers. Your sweet spot is really try to bring the fight to your own advantage below 10 kilometers or more like preferably 5 to 8 kilometers. Now, just because you're below 5 to 8 kilometers doesn't always guarantee your success because you're guaranteed to also take a lot of damage. Atlanta was not designed to be a cruiser in mind in terms of what all the other cruisers that you see, which is pretty much having the fighting capabilities of facing other heavy cruiser. She was designed to be a support escort light cruiser to escort large capital ships like aircraft carriers, battleships against enemy fleet or at least enemy fleets in terms of the squadron of planes attacking, and she's been proven to be very effective. One of the Atlanta class cruisers managed to be one of the highest decorated American ships out of World War II, and overall the Atlanta was a very solid ship. Now, aside from being an escort light cruiser for the fleet in the Pacific Ocean, she wasn't also just designed for escorting, but she was also designed for operation during the night, operation on the shores, offshore bombardment, bombarding enemy territory, at the same time dealing with destroyers big time when it comes to close quarter combat. And the Atlanta has been proven to be effective in her case of battle when she was facing the Akatsuki, which is the tier 7 Japanese destroyer. She absolutely obliterated those Japanese destroyers because of the number of guns she had. Like I said, she's basically 3 gearings, and if you don't know what the gearing is, it is the tier 10 American destroyer. So aside from that, it was a very short fun game. I was able to score 4 medal. One was high caliber, other one was Confederate. The third one was Kraken, and the fourth one, which was the last and final medal, was my last salvo. I was able to kill that cruiser, which gave me a flesh wound. So aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this little short gameplay, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.